Hey, this is Brooke, functional medicine dietitian specializing in fertility, and this is the Fertility Dietitian podcast, where I help you uncover the barriers that are preventing you from optimizing your fertility and teach you how to work with your body to finally take home a healthy baby. Each week, I will be diving into different topics on fertility and sharing my perspective on physiology, metabolic health, nutrition, and lifestyle approaches that have helped hundreds of couples get pregnant even after years of heartache. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to take back control of your fertility. Happy listening. This is a meaty episode, so it's a little bit longer than my typical episodes, but necessary, I feel like, because it's a hot topic nutrient. We're going to be talking about folate today and all of the difference between folate and folic acid and the research behind it. I am going to be linking 29 research articles in the show notes here. So if you have questions about the evidence, all of the receipts are here. Okay. So folate is a hot topic nutrient and an unnecessarily controversial nutrient, and we'll learn all about why in this episode. But when talking about preconception and pregnancy, due to the role that folate has in decreasing neural tube defects, it is a topic that is so important to talk about. Early in pregnancy, there's what we know as a neural tube that should close to support appropriate development of the baby's brain and spine. A few less talked about risk factors of low folate include congenital heart defects, premature birth, low birth weight, and I'm pretty sure we can all agree that folate is a very important nutrient. And like all nutrients, folate works synergistically with other nutrients like choline, vitamin B12, vitamin B6, glycine, riboflavin, and magnesium. And that's just a few important nutrient buddies to folate. And this episode is going to focus on folate itself, but just remember that it does not work alone. And I think it's oversimplified a lot of the time that folate, or often in our fertility clinics, it's folic acid, which we will talk about the differences there, is emphasized, but we can't forget about these other nutrients because they are so important for the neural tube closure process and how folate itself functions. Okay. So the type of folate that is consumed matters. The names folic acid and folate are often used interchangeably, but they are very different. Okay. So what's the difference between this folate and folic acid? Well, folates are naturally occurring in foods like beans, avocados, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and broccoli. And there are actually many types of naturally occurring folates in food, not just one. However, the main folate found in the blood from food is 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, or 5-MTHFF for short. The 5-MTHF form is active or ready for the body to use in the many metabolic reactions it's needed for. Folic acid, on the other hand, is a man-made version of folate that doesn't have any biological function unless it is reduced to the active form, 5-MTHF. Okay. Folic acid is only found in fortified foods such as fortified grains and supplements. Folic acid has to be activated or reduced in order to be used in the body. All right. Once the connection was made that adequate folate levels decreased neural tube defects, which was back in the 1960s, 1965 to be specific, this is when food fortification of folic acid followed about 30 years later in the 1990s, around 1996 to 1998 in the US specifically. And along with this food fortification process, recommendations for high dose supplementation of folic acid came. Okay. This public health effort was successful in reducing the cases of neural tube defects by 19 to 32%. But remember, folic acid is man-made and has to be activated or reduced in order to be used in the body. And an estimated 40 to 60% of the population can metabolize or activate folic acid for the body to use. This means that the other 40 to 60% cannot efficiently metabolize or use folic acid. Those that cannot efficiently reduce folic acid into the 5-MTHF have genetic variants in a gene that actually regulate an enzyme called MTHFR. MTHFR stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, which is an enzyme that reduces folate into the active form of 5-MTHF. This process is necessary for the body to use folate to prevent neural tube defects. When folic acid can't be reduced or activated, it hangs out in the body as unmetabolized folic acid. Research is showing when consuming folic acid over 200 micrograms per day, the body has trouble converting it into the active form 5-MTHF, even if genetic variants are not present. Unmetabolized folic acid is the reason I use extreme caution around supplementing folic acid for anybody. The negative side effects of unmetabolized folic acid are discussed later in this episode, but first let's talk about what we know about active folate supplementation, okay? So you might be wondering if we can supplement this active form instead of the man-made folic acid form, okay? There's no specific study looking at 5-MTHF or the active folate supplementation and neural tube defects. But do we really need this specific study to know that 5-MTHF can prevent neural tube defects? The major medical organizations might need these specific studies to change recommendations that have been in place for decades, but this doesn't mean we don't have enough information to know that there is a better option, especially with the building research on negative side effects of the unmetabolized folic acid. All right. The research shows that 5-MTHF supplementation, or that active folate, increases folate levels in the blood as well as and even better than folic acid. Okay. Researchers consistently state that supplemental 5-MTHF can effectively improve folate biomarkers in young women in early pregnancy in order to prevent neural tube defects. And 5-MTHF appears to be an efficient and safe alternative to folic acid. Blood levels have to increase for the nutrient to be able to carry out its role in preventing neural tube defects. So even though we haven't seen the funds spent on the research to look at 5-MTHF and neural tube defects specifically, the biomarker data is very meaningful. Okay, we have observational studies comparing supplemental or supplementation of folic acid to MTHF during pregnancy. They didn't look specifically at preventing neural tube defects, but they did look at blood levels, which is how the body uses folate to be able to prevent neural tube defects. The US FDA approved oral contraceptives to be combined with 5-MTHF, active folate, in order to reduce the risk of neural tube defects in women who conceive while taking birth control or soon after. 5-MTHF is approved in oral contraceptives, not folic acid. Okay, the active 5-MTHF. This is very meaningful. It is clear that increased folate in the diet increases folate markers in the blood, and we know that folate from food can prevent neural tube defects. We also know that 5-MTHF supplementation increases folate blood markers, which is the same way folic acid prevents neural tube defects. There isn't a reason to believe that a randomized controlled study is necessary to have before recommending the 5-MTHF supplementation, right? A couple of reasons why research specifically looking for neural tube defects and MTHF hasn't been done include money. This active form, the 5-MTHF, is about 260 times the cost of folic acid per kilo. Who's going to fund this? Who is benefiting from this research not being done? Remember that folic acid is man-made and patented. It's a patented substance. So there are people making money on the research being done around folic acid. And if we change medical recommendations around folic acid, who loses money, right? Okay. The second reason is time. It would take years and thousands of pregnancies to compare folic acid to 5-MTHF supplementation. It is unethical to test 5-MTHF against a placebo, okay? Because we're talking about the health outcomes of mom and baby. Those that are saying, I don't recommend folate until there is a randomized controlled study looking specifically at neural tube defects, simply don't understand folate metabolism. Based on the building research of the unmetabolized folic acid and poor health outcomes, continuing to recommend high doses of folic acid should be strongly cautioned for everyone. Potential side effects of folic acid, which we need to talk about next. So, research shows that high levels of folic acid can interfere with methylation pathways. What does that mean? Methylation pathways are how nutrients work together to carry out functions like producing energy, supporting detoxification, reducing inflammation, supporting DNA expression, and so much more. Methylation is also involved in the prevention of neural tube defects during early pregnancy. High levels of folic acid can interfere with methylation pathways, both in those that have MTHFR variations and those who don't. When our body gets 5-MTHF, it is already available to support the methylation pathways and decrease neural tube defects or the bazillion other jobs that methylation is necessary for, like heart health and neurological function, detox system function, DNA production, and more. Folic acid supplementation and unmetabolized folic acid have been associated with increased risk for allergic diseases, especially respiratory tract allergies among infants and young children. Unmetabolized folic acid is found in newborns, and we don't fully understand the effects of unmetabolized folic acid in any human, let alone newborns. So supplementation with folic acid during pregnancy should be cautioned. Circulating unmetabolized folic acid is also associated with higher risk for neonatal jaundice, infant asthma, pre-developmental delay, and even autism. If we don't have the ingredients for methylation, like folate, brain development can be impacted. Unmetabolized folic acid is associated with reduced natural killer cell toxicity. And natural killer cells are the first line of defense in the prevention of carcinogens and viral infections. Okay? Unmetabolized folic acid is associated with elevated homocysteine, which is an inflammatory marker. And we know that elevated homocysteine levels are a risk factor for miscarriage. High folic acid supplementation can mask a specific type of anemia called megaloblastic anemia that can occur with low vitamin B12, low folate, or both. And this is due to how nutrients are involved in red blood cell production And 5-MTHF or folate from food does not mask megaloblastic anemia. Okay. So, there's a researcher that stated the natural form of folate, which is the 5-MTHF, offers several advantages compared to folic acid. It does not mask B12 deficiency. It is already a biologically active form. It does not cause unmetabolized folic acid in the blood, and it is absorbed and utilized at least as well as folic acid. Although there are no clinical trials on the effectiveness of 5-MTHF in preventing neural tube defects, metabolic studies have shown that this 5-MTHF is biologically active form of the vitamin, and it seems to be at least as effective as folic acid in improving biomarkers. The literature clearly shows that a better food folate intake is associated with better folate markers, and that food folate can prevent neural tube defects because it's increasing folate status. Folic acid can prevent neural tube defects by increasing serum blood folate levels, right? So 5-MTHF can effectively increase serum or blood folate markers as well, essentially showing that it's impacting risk for neural tube defects. As you can see, the building research is showing that high doses of folic acid should be cautioned, whether there is an MTHFR variation or not. And the data we have supports this active 5-MTHF as a safe supplement for supporting methylation and preventing neural tube defects. Okay, so what should you do in order to limit or eliminate this folic acid? Well, here are my top tips. First, focus on incorporating foods rich in food folate, like beans, lentils, avocados, spinach, broccoli, asparagus, beets, whole eggs, liver, and liver can be from duck, beef, chicken, or even lamb. Next, limit foods that are fortified with folic acid, like enriched white flour. So this would be your bread, your pasta, your cereals, and other products made with white flour. And the goal is to keep intake below 200 micrograms of folic acid, as this is the amount that starts to interfere with folate metabolism. One slice of bread has about 30 micrograms of folic acid, while cereals have anywhere from 150 micrograms to 400 micrograms of folic acid per cup. Okay. So whole wheat and whole grains are not typically fortified with folic acid. So opting for bread and grain products with the first ingredient as whole wheat or whole grain can limit folic acid intake as well. Okay. Next, choose a high quality prenatal vitamin that has 5-MTHF. Okay. And or folinic acid, as well as other nutrients that are supportive of a healthy pregnancy and decreasing neural tube defect. A couple of my favorite prenatals are Full Fertility and Needed Nourishment. The supplement regimen should be individualized based on what your body needs. So please note that not all of these have, or these two, especially Full and Needed, don't have iron, as this is a very individualized nutrient. So other supplements may be necessary depending on your diet, your gut health, your fertility history. So working with a fertility dietitian for best outcomes and individualization is going to be really helpful here. But your Full prenatal and your Needed prenatal have active forms of folate and are going to have their other nutrients like your B6 and your B12 and active forms, choline and magnesium, and those other nutrients that are going to support folate activity and methylation as a whole as well. So they are good foundational supplements for the majority of people. It is possible to get enough folate in your diet if you are frequently eating liver and other folate-rich foods. And the recommendation is at least 600 micrograms of food folate a day during pregnancy and a minimum of 400 micrograms during preconception. Although I really do suggest 800 or 600 to 800 micrograms during the 3 to 4 months of preconception when you're trying to conceive, because once that neural tube is closing, it's really hard to catch up for folate intake. It's really the preconception levels that are going to have a really big impact on those really early weeks of development in baby's spine and brain. Okay. And then, of course, throughout pregnancy, it's still very important as well. All right. So I know this is a lot of information. It's a little bit heavier content than I'm typically presenting. And again, I have linked the research articles. There's 29 of them that are linked. You can find that link in the show notes. And I just wanted to wrap up with some takeaways from this episode. So if you remember anything, remember this part. The majority of the folate in your body is 5-MTHF, which is the most abundant folate in foods. And this is the active form of folate. Folic acid, on the other hand, is man-made version of folate that is found in fortified foods and supplements. Folic acid has to be converted into 5-MTHF in the body with the help of many other nutrients and an enzyme called MTHFR. About 40 to 60% of the population has a MTHFR genetic variation, which makes the conversion of folic acid to folate even less efficient. Side effects of high folic acid intake occur in those with and without MTHFR variations. Side effects seem to be a result of the unmetabolized folic acid and include inflammation, poor pregnancy outcomes, altered development of baby, and immune system interference. There are a number of studies showing that 5-MTHF is at least as effective as folic acid in raising folate blood levels. Folate blood levels are necessary to support methylation and therefore decrease neural tube risk. Eating a diet rich in food folate, limiting folic acid fortified foods, and including a high quality prenatal with 5-MTHF is recommended. Thanks for hanging in here with me. This is a very important, although has become controversial topic in the fertility world. And again, like supplementation should be very much individualized, but starting with that foundation with the active folate in your comprehensive prenatal is a good place to start. And if you're looking for additional support, you know where to find me. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Dietitian podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review to let me know what topics you want more of or less of. If you want to keep learning, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out my website for more info on my private coaching program, Master Your Fertility, or my membership community, Fertility Blueprint. And don't forget my digital store. Come say hi on YouTube and Instagram. See you in the next episode.